Welcome to the MIT and Beyond show. I'm your trusted host, Rob Kalwarowsky, and today we have some double Rob action. Rob Fleischman's here to be with us today. Rob, how are you?
Doing great today. Thanks for having me.
It's amazing to have another Rob on the show. We get double the wisdom for one of the names. Now, Rob, of course, we connected over LinkedIn through Joe Boringer, who was a former guest on the show, and over this quote from Sally Kornbluth, where she mentioned the only way to get through MIT is the hard way. Now, of course, as a fellow MIT graduate, can you tell us a little bit about you, your MIT experience, and what led you to posting that quote?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, she's right. It's always the hard way, especially there. And, I'm certainly not the only one who believes that. Probably generations, you could probably go back 50 years and, the alums will say, oh, yeah, it was brutal. It's not summer camp for sure. Yeah. I mean, MIT was amazing for me. Really got put into an environment of geniuses, people who were just incredible. You get imposter syndrome immediately. You feel like you don't know anything. Everybody knows everything, and you don't belong there. And then, you quickly discover that instead of being great at everything like you were in high school, you discover, yeah, I'm okay at like a couple things. And then most of the stuff I suck, And then you hopefully lean into some things you're passionate about that you enjoy and that maybe you're not terrible at in your eyes, and you kind of get through and build a life and career afterwards. But boy, it definitely taught me about hard things. That's for sure. The other thing that's wild, Rob, is, you kind of go in and your knowledge is a circle, right? A little circle. And the border of the circle is what you think you don't know. And then you go to MIT and the circle gets really big, right? You learn a lot more, but you discover, oh my God, there's so many things I don't know, So you kind of leave thinking, I don't really know anything, You go to your first job and then you discover, wait a minute, I'm actually not so bad, But yeah, great journey for me. I was there 5 years. I did the old 6A program. I was computer science undergrad, and then of course got my master's as well. And it was really an amazing experience for sure. Met a lot of wonderful people, including Joe, who's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I remember freshman year, I was talking to our GRE, and he was like, "Don't worry, when you get to work, it's easier than it is here." And I was like failing like half my classes on pass no record. And I was like, I am so dumb. Like, what's going on?
Rob, my wife, Marianne, she went to medical school, BU Med afterwards. And, everyone's, oh, medical school is brutal. She goes, this is easy compared to MIT. I mean, no problem. Longer hours, but, just sort of a wild thing. But, yeah, so, graduated MIT, went and worked for, a little known at the, now at the time place called BBN. And for those who are super nerdy like me, they'll remember that BBN is one of the places where the internet got started. And that really, by luck, launched my career. I worked in the distributed systems department with some incredible people like Harry Forsdick, Ginny Travers, who was involved in inventing the first router. Got to work very closely with Ray Tomlinson, who sent the first email, invented email. So, I was just sort of dropped into this incredible environment of people who were working on this thing called the internet, which at the time was, we're talking AOL dial-up back then, So we were, I was dropped in there as this young MIT grad learning about internet infrastructure. And honestly, we kind of had to invent half of it. You know what I mean? It was like, well, we don't have this. Oh, well, why don't you just build one? Okay, we'll go do that, And so here we are building stuff, inventing things, firewalls, anti-spam technology, all kinds of stuff that, became sort of the plumbing of the, internet as we know it today, and there was no wireless, right? So that had to be invented. So I was involved with kind of what people aren't particularly excited about today, but the plumbing, the low level stuff. And I had a really great career. I worked at BBN for a long time. I left BBN to go work at Fidelity and help them build intranet and internet technology, firewall, intranet services. I mean, there was no way to do it besides build it yourself. Worked on some projects there. And then after that, I left to do my first of a few startups and started a company working on internet news technology, moving articles around, and then worked for a company doing, email, anti-spam, spam and abuse prevention. Then I got into DNS and did DNS technology, recursive DNS technology, a number of startups there, and ended up, my last job was working for Akamai, which is still around. One of the largest internet infrastructure companies in the world, and, really learned about not just delivering technology to small companies and large companies and carriers, but doing it globally, which was really amazing. And working at Akamai at the end of my career was great. And I retired from there about 5 years ago. Yeah.
And so, Rob, what do you spend your time with today?
Yeah. So I sort of turned outward. I joined an organization called Tiger 21 as a member. And Tiger 21, you kind of think of it as two ways. It's sort of grad school for entrepreneurs, if you will, grad school for wealth creators. So, you have all these organizations like Vistage and YPO and all these different forums that kind of help you grow your business and hire a CFO, work on your business plan, double your revenue and all that. In Tiger, it's more afterwards. It's, hey, you've done all that. You've climbed this mountain. How are you going to live the rest of your life? What are you going to do with your wealth? How are you going to raise your kids? What are you going to do for enjoyment? What's your second mountain, your third mountain? What are those things that are going to bring fulfillment to your life now that you've kind of accomplished a lot of great things? I mean, you still might have great things to do, but, your biggest problem isn't hiring a new CFO. Your biggest problem is, how do I live this new life? And so I became a member there. I was actually the first member in Boston. And then about 5-6 years ago, when I was contemplating retiring from Akamai, I actually transitioned from being a member to being a chair. So now I actually run groups at Tiger. I run them a little differently since I'm, a member too. So I sort of sit down at the table with, hey, I'm not just running this group. I got the same problems you guys have. So, really wonderful, diverse group of women and men and minorities and young and old and tech and non-tech and inheritors and wealth creators and people who are still working, people who aren't working, really diverse crowd. And we get together and meet once a month. Been doing that for years, and, support each other in a peer-to-peer environment. Very confidential, very sort of on the down low, and it's been a life changer for me.
Rob, this is something like I work on a lot with my clients as well, even though they're mostly still in the creation phase, is that separation of identity from work. Like, what was that journey like for you? And like, how do you navigate those with your peers?
That is an incredibly common problem, right? You work really hard, you become a very senior person. Maybe you're the boss, all your jokes are funny because everybody works for you. And
I like
even
to
if it's
think I'm
not,
always funny.
yeah, even if it's not that, you wake up every day working on important things, important to the company, important to you, important to employees. You have a lot of responsibility. And then when that evaporates, right, for whatever reason, whether, the company is sold or you leave or you retire or whatever, there's certainly an emptiness, absolutely an emptiness. But, for my particular situation, I really turned outward. I filled that emptiness with optionality. So, when someone says, hey, I'm heading toward this exit, what's on the other side of it? Look, I'm not the kind of guy who, wants to play golf 6-7 days a week. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, whether it's golf or pickleball or running or whatever your activity is. Hey, that's great if that brings meaning to you. So that's really the thing, is the search for your meaning. And we talk a lot about that. I know you work with your clients about that, and we talk a lot about that in our meetings about, what's bringing you joy. So for me, a few things. One is optionality. I use that word, but what it means to me is, Rob, being able to do what I want with who I want for as long as I want. I kind of look at it and say, that is just an incredible gift in my life. Now, I don't get that every day. But, because I got stuff to do, just like everybody else. Someone's got to take out the trash, change the litter box for the cats. I mean, I don't want to do that, but it's got to be done. And, but for the most part, I lean into that optionality. And that's given me the ability to pick and choose things that make me happy and do good things for the world. I also am really tough about regular commitments. Rob, you call me up and say, Fleischman, we'd love to have you at our meeting, every third Tuesday of every other month. I'll be like, nah, I can't make that. But if it's every so often and we could pick the date together and work together on, well, okay, that I'm interested in, but I try not to make regular commitments, because that way my life is has a lot more optionality for me. I can wake up on a Monday and say, well, what are we going to do this week? And that's what really brings me a lot of joy. Again, not the same for everybody, but that's sort of where I am in my life. And what keeps me busy, of course, my peer-to-peer group is really a big deal. I have served on the board of some endowments, charitable endowments, one of the largest ones here in New Hampshire. I've done work. Philanthropy is a big thing for my family. We embrace time, treasure, and talent. We're mostly focused on women and children in crisis. So domestic violence centers, reproductive freedom, healthcare, children in crisis, that's sort of our theme, which, by the way, I think is another thing that folks who have had some success need to embrace. I have gotten a lot of joy in my life by being a small part of these wonderful philanthropic efforts. I can't do what Melinda Gates is doing. I don't have those kind of assets, but the stuff that I have done has brought me a lot of joy, and it's wonderful to be a part of helping the world be a better place and helping individuals who are in crisis escape those crises.
I think that's one of the things. I mean, Rob, what you mentioned with optionality, like a big thing that I work actually with a lot of folks is starting to choose deliberately, exactly as you mentioned, is choose things that bring them joy and fulfillment. And like literally I was on a call with an executive, I think it was like 2 days ago. He was struggling with like the internals of like making choices, and he always wanted to join the cycling group. And it was like, but there was the part going, don't do it. And it's like, we worked through it and it was like, okay, I'll just go and join it. Like, it's not like it's like they're going to reject him, right? You just show up. And so it's like, but it's still like we get in our own ways with these things when it's like the cost of joining is basically zero. And we got to give ourselves that ability to just choose and go out and do things, because it's going to lead us to even just enjoying our lives more.
Well, Rob, there's another obstacle that I think MIT grads in particular have a problem with. And that is that I would say it's productivity. We get up and our head hits the pillow at the end of the day and you go, well, what did I do today? What problems did I solve? What hill did I climb? What rock did I lift? And when you don't have a job, right, sometimes you feel empty. You're like, well, what the hell did I do today? I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything of value, right? So those obstacles, I mean, of course, that's all made up baloney, right? I mean, we make up these, assessments of value, right? So one of the exercises I've done to try and alleviate that in my crazy monkey mind, because you can't, there's all kinds of great reprogramming. I've been unable to reprogram my software, so I just hack it. And here's the hack I use, Rob. My hack is really simple. I sit down and I say, I got 3 goals every day, right? One of them is do something mentally challenging, do something physically challenging, and do something fun. And if I get all 3 every day, man, that is a fantastic day. And by the way, you could use that even if you have a job, right? But my thought is if I reframe it that way, then at the end of the day, I'm feeling like, man, this was a fantastic day, right? I stretched myself in some way mentally. I stretched myself physically, and I had some fun. And look, I don't deny my privilege. There's no question. I'm just so grateful. And gratefulness is another part of my life, being grateful. I've done a lot of work, and it's gotten me to a great place, and I'm really grateful for it. And I enjoy that, and I recognize the privilege. No question. No question. I don't feel entitled, that's for sure. But at the same time, gratefulness is a big part of my life. I'm really, really grateful for, the education I had, the opportunity and luck. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that just thinks, oh, it was all me and all that. That's crazy. I got dropped into a particular time and I had a particular skill set, and with hard work and luck and the right people and the right teams and the right timing, there was great success. Of course, I tell my children, I have 2 daughters, they're in their 20s. College grads, and they're launching their careers. I tell them, there's always opportunity. I look around today and I say, wow, if I were you, I mean, what an exciting time with robotics and AI and compute technology and stuff. I was working with chisels and hammers compared. I mean, it's like, I remember, wow, we have a 9 gigabyte drive. I mean, that was like, holy cow. Can you believe how much we could store on that? I mean, I remember when they came in and I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's only this big, and so, it's sort of a joke, the tech we were using, compared to them. So I'm excited for them. I think there's more opportunity now than when I started. But you know what? I took advantage of what was around at the time, and I'm really glad that I did, and I'm glad the hard work paid off, for sure.
I think you're right, Rob, I think that there's always opportunity. The part that I think a lot of folks get sucked into is that they're hoping that the opportunity is sort of be gifted to them.
Mm.
And I think if you're strategic and you look, you can create your own. I mean, of course, there's limitations to this, but you can create your own opportunity in a lot of ways.
I got a couple good quotes for you. I can't remember who said this. Yeah, I'd have to Google it, but this guy said he's a chess player. And he said, I've been watching all these chess things and reading chess books, and I noticed it seems only the grand masters seem to get lucky. And I was like, I got to hear what you're saying. The other thing, which is sort of on the downside, and I say this to my daughters. I say, look, wealth is a part of success, but wealth does not automatically come to those who work the hardest or those who are the smartest. Life is not a meritocracy, right? You did great. Oh, therefore I should. No, that's not how it works. Life is not fair. Wealth is earned by those who do something that other people value. Now, we can argue about what people value being smart or stupid. Maybe you're not happy with, the Kardashians being billionaires or whatever. I mean, that's all internal in your head. But the bottom line is wealth comes to those who do something that other people value, which is really difficult to accept for particular MIT people who are usually smart, hard workers. So where the smart, hard workers go, well, I'm smart, I'm working hard. What's going on here? Where's the piles of wealth? Why isn't that flowing my way, right? And that's just not how it works. I mean, I wish it worked differently. It does not. So that's another interesting message, right? I mean, on one hand, the grandmasters seem to get lucky, but on the other hand, but being the smartest, hardest working person in the world, I mean, there's some correlation, but it's not 1-to-1 for sure.
You're absolutely right. I was actually looking at the graph, I think it was a couple of days ago. It's definitely like people with high IQ and high EQ do the best out of everybody. People with high IQ and low EQ do okay. Obviously, people with low IQ and high EQ do similarly okay. And then obviously the people who are bad at both don't do well. But that's the biggest transition. And to be honest, I wish I would have known more about the emotional intelligence side, the relationship side, the power and influence in building side. If I would have known that earlier in my career, I think things would have been a lot different. But those are the things I teach folks now. And it's like these light switches go on and their careers take off. And it's like, they're not huge adjustments. They're very small things.
Very true. There's another little tip I give young people. Of course, I share it with my daughters. I'll share it with you guys. And that is the concept of coupling. I'm not sure who I stole that idea from. Almost all my ideas are stolen from other people.
That's everybody.
I just remember things, So, but coupling, I think about this. I think about, someone who draws a comic strip, right? They're not the best artist, right? They're no Jerry Seinfeld on stage, right? So they're not the funniest and they're not the best artist, but the coupling of the art and being somewhat funny, all of a sudden you're an amazing cartoonist, right? So in my world, sure. I was pretty damn good at building tech, inventing things, building good products, all that. Was I the best? Absolutely not. But being a nerdy person who could explain nerdy things to non-nerdy people and get them excited about it and build that stuff, all of a sudden the coupling of that was something unique, right? I mean, there were definitely engineers I worked with run circles around me technically, but then you throw them in front of an audience and say, hey, get them excited about our product, and they're not going to work. So, I think I was able to couple some things together that really made my journey unique. So I say that to young people. I say, I said, look, it's wonderful that, you can hit the golf club, the ball the farthest, but, if you can't market yourself or have a great image, I mean, there's, as you said, there's a lot more to it than just one raw skill. But you're right. If you enable those things, boy, it's a real accelerator on your progress. The other thing that's funny is, and of course you only see this looking back, but everybody wants to be on top of the mountain. Everybody wants to be, but all the good stuff happens when you're climbing. And I remember my last couple of years at Akamai. I'm this, crazy senior engineer. I can't even principal something. I don't even remember my title, but it was all the toughest problems kind of bubbled up through the organization. And I was working on, the hardest stuff, and everybody wanted to be there, and I did it over and over and over again. And it was exciting and everything. But towards the end of my career, I just said, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's just not what I want to keep doing. There are some people that want to die at their desk, Rob. That's fine. I just wasn't one of them, and so I made a big move and said, I'm retiring from technology 5 years ago. I do a little bit here and there, advising and whatnot. But, if you want to call me up and say, hey, Rob, I'm starting this recursive DNS company, and you used to be the big man and the big man on campus, I'm gonna be like, nah, no more. I just don't do that stuff. I got to the top of that mountain. I looked around. It was wonderful. But as I think back, it was really the climb. The climb was really the stuff that I think about and bring me pleasure as I think back on my career. Which is sort of funny. You would think, oh my God, when you were at the top of the mountain and doing, the top person, wasn't that the best time? It was all right, but sort of the climb was what I think back on as being the most fun and most pleasurable time.
Honestly, Rob, I don't think that's uncommon. Like last time when we spoke, almost everybody has this feeling of like, I want to achieve whatever this is, the gold medal, the corner office, 10 million in revenue, whatever that is. And then when you get there, you're like, well, I don't feel any better. Right. And I was coaching an Olympic gold medalist once, and I said to her, I was like, how long did it last? And she's like, they barely put the medal around my neck. And I was like, what's next?
Yeah.
And I think us as like high achievers, as folks that went to MIT, we all felt this. And it's like, once you figure out who you truly are, and that's where you felt it, where it was like, yeah, I've had enough of technology. I want to make an impact in the lives of other people. I want to help them. And I'm not saying everybody is going to go on that same helping people journey. It could be different for you. Like there are some folks that are like, I want to nerd out on 6G internet. And that's cool, man. Like, but it's like, once you understand yourself and what you love, like that's where you want to go and stay. And like the ladder or whatever the perceptions are, like get truer to yourself and let that stuff go away.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think when the gold medalist, when the medal goes around their neck, or your company goes public, or you deposit, your first $1 million or whatever, whatever that crazy goal is, you put that, and you check that box, you start saying, wow, this was something I was impressed with before, and now that I have it, there's a number of emotions. One can be, well, what's the next thing? Right. And you got to be careful with that, especially in the financial world, right? Because you get on this hedonic treadmill where the goalposts keep moving, right? And in some ways, at least in my life, being happy and fulfilled was really about stopping the goalposts from moving. Envy is a crazy emotion there. You have one gold medal and you envy the guy who's got 5. Or you make $1 million and you want 10 million bucks, 10 million, you want 100 million, then you want billions, it just, it becomes this never ending thing on the wealth side. My journey, I when I was younger, I was impressed by wealth. And then, as my wealth grew, or people with wealth, that person, they must be amazing. I discovered a few things. The first thing is I started being less impressed, as I got to meet and associate with people who were wealth creators in all different worlds, I became less impressed with wealth. I became more impressed with what people do with their wealth. That's impressive to me. you go on TikTok and, some guy's got a jet and his cars, he's on his boat and all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, I don't really care, but tell me someone who's like, hey, here's this school I built in some rural community. One of the things that brings me to tears is thinking about some of the work we do with domestic violence and supporting our local women's shelter, where I know that, a dozen people are safe every single night. And if you tell me about how you've helped someone or built something tangible or taken someone who was unable to support themselves and now they have a career and they're self-supporting, and, I'm really impressed by that. That's interesting. That I want to think about. That I want to envy. That I want to say, wow, that's incredible. That I want to hear more about. But at this point in my life, I'm just unimpressed and uninterested with, let me tell you how I went from $2 million to $10 million. I just don't care. That's like telling me, I got 3 pens and now I have 6 pens. And I don't mean to talk down to people that don't admire wealth or people with wealth. As I got older, I discovered that just had really no interest. Yeah. So that transition was another one for me. Stopping the goalposts from moving, focusing on what I actually covet, what I actually want more of for myself. And it isn't more buckets of money. It's more meaning. And when my head hits the pillow at night, feeling more joy, Now look, being wealthy is great. Not worrying about money is great. Okay. But again, having a gold medal is great. I don't know if having 3 gold medals versus 5 gold medals, I don't know too much about that delta. You know what I'm saying? That's sort of what I'm saying.
Rob, something that we chatted about, right, is your daughters were going to college and you were recommending that they didn't choose the MIT path.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I gotta get truthful here, Rob. So, both my daughters were technology tilted. One of them is a computer scientist. One of them is a computer engineer, which in English is, by the way, didn't exist when we went to school. Computer engineering is much more sort of lower level hardware, firmware, that kind of stuff. My other daughter, computer science, more typical, up at the higher levels of the abstractions, applications, that sort of stuff. So both of them were applying to college. And I said, geez, when I went, MIT was like, the on the hill above everything, incredible. This was the place, the only place, really, Yeah. And now, one of them went to Duke Engineering, Pratt School of Engineering. The other one went to Cornell. And these schools had everything that MIT had, but were, for lack of a better word, a real college. Cornell's got great ice hockey. Duke's got basketball, football. They have team spirit. There are people there who aren't just the complete, total rocket scientists. That's sure. You go to the engineering schools and within certain schools, you're going to see all the geniuses that you see at MIT, but they're much more well-rounded. And my daughter's got a college experience that I never had, not even one day, And I got to tell you, my wife and I, we leaned into it big. We were living vicariously through our children as they got a real college experience. And they graduated knowing incredible technology and learning a lot, but they got experiences that we just never had. Rob, I'm willing to bet $1 that neither you or I sat outside an MIT basketball game waiting to get a seat.
I've gone to a few, but I never waited in line.
Exactly. I can assure you that my daughter, who went to Duke, she camped outside, lived in a tent for months to get a seat at a Duke basketball game, and we never did that.
I just want to say, now in the NIL era, our alumni base is so rich that we should be fielding top teams.
That's right.
We should crush everything.
Rob, I was watching a Georgia Tech game, and I'm thinking to myself, these 6'8", 9, 10, basketball players, how do they fit in the Georgia Tech, because the last thing I remember, Georgia Tech, much more like an MIT type alumni, but, student body. So, but yeah, well, maybe that's what MIT needs to do. They need to throw down some money and get a good basketball team.
That's right. Get Nick Saban out of retirement. Let's go, baby.
Exactly. Exactly. They got the money. There's no question. The endowment's huge. But yeah, so I mean, look, honestly, all jokes aside, the real conversation I had with my daughters was back to the word I mentioned earlier, and that is optionality. I wanted them to have an opportunity that I didn't have. And that is to look, I went to MIT, but there was a weight on my back of expectation, of success, of being intelligent, of proving that you weren't that imposter, and I didn't want my daughters to have that. I wanted them to have optionality where they could go to college and say, this is the field I'm really interested in. And, maybe it makes money, maybe it makes a little money, maybe it makes a lot of money. It doesn't matter. But it's what I'm passionate about, what I really love and want to spend the rest of my life doing. And I wanted them to have that. And I wanted them to go to a place where they had a potpourri of choices. I mean, I think genetics are, genetics. My wife went to MIT too. She was more of a biology person. But, I mean, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, I think. But I still wanted them to have that optionality, and they did. And I think they had a much more well-rounded and happier college experience than I did. Not to beat up MIT too much, but it's sort of weird. You're in this weird thing. You're like, wow, I'm so thankful, but I didn't want my kids to go there. It's sort of weird, but, that's just the truth.
It was definitely, for me, I think, like my sister went to Queen's in Ontario, and it's one of Canada's top colleges. And her experience, I look at mine and I go, if I hadn't gone to MIT, I don't know how well I would have done at those schools just because of the way they worked. Like I needed to be in the weeds the whole time.
Maybe Rob, maybe that's true for me too. Maybe I would have gotten into all kinds of trouble and, maybe just be, carrying so much weight, expectation in an environment of super, super high achievers was maybe that's what I needed. Look, I don't regret it, but it wasn't something I was lining my kids up for.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, I think, it's something like my dad said to me before I went to, while I was applying for college was like, you need to take a degree that when you graduate, you get a job.
Right. Well, that was right.
Right. It was like, there needs to be a return on investment on this degree.
Same thing, but that was what I didn't want for my daughters. I didn't want them going in with this, oh my God, they're spending all this money. And, if I don't graduate with something, I'm totally screwed. Now, it turned out it all worked out great for them anyway, but I just didn't I think they had their own internal drive and focus, and I didn't need to put any more on, And, candidly, Rob, being a parent, if you have two MIT grads as your parents and you see them working hard and you see them pushing and doing stuff, I don't think you need to give too many lectures to your children. I think they just kind of see that and it just sort of happens. I mean, that's, when I talk to my peers about their kids, it's sort of the same thing, It's like, yeah, we didn't have to give them any of these lectures. It just sort of, genetics plus environment and away they go, Yeah, that definitely is what happened to my girls. And they seem really happy. They've launched into good careers and they seem to have, happy lives or well-balanced, a lot more than me, that's for sure.
Rob, last question before we get you out of here.
Sure.
On your journey and something I've really struggled with for a long time was finding gratitude. And it's only been really recently where I've been able to cultivate that. Like, how was your journey in finding that? And how do you stay in tune with gratefulness on your day-to-day?
Well, a few things. First is, there's a practice, and I was basically non-existent in meditation my whole life. I didn't know what it was. If somebody talked to me about it, I thought it was foo-foo, crazy. I'm not doing that. That's nutty. What a waste of time. What am I accomplishing? Right. Going back to our, what am I getting done if I meditate for 30 minutes? That doesn't make any sense. That sounds like I'm just wasting time. Why don't I take a nap? Which by the way is also a good idea, but that's a different topic. So, discovering that gratefulness, especially coupled with meditation, really brought clarity and happiness to my life. I express gratitude every day before my feet hit the floor, when I'm in bed. I think about 2 or 3 things I'm grateful for every morning. But then, Rob, the other thing is, the turning outward, understanding that, if we throw all our problems in a pile, boy, I'm grabbing mine back quick, real quick. And when you start interacting with other people, whether they have no wealth or no success or tremendous wealth and tremendous success, as you know, dollars do not change the problems in your life, whether it's health problems, relationship problems, internal mental problems, physical, just dollars and family and all that, sometimes it makes it worse. If you're from a big family, sometimes you have bigger problems, So I am really grateful for the problems that I have and the benefits I have. So I think the exposure to other people, having a great peer group, being open with them, having close relationships with them, having amazing close friends has made me realize how blessed and privileged I am and grateful for both my past and my present, the friends and family that I'm able to spend time with now. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny you say about the meditation thing. Similar to you, I've only really come into meditation in the last couple of years. I actually do a fair amount of it with my clients. We do like visualization work and that kind of thing. But it's so funny because sometimes I still have that little, like last year in January, I was doing a breath work thing. And so we're in a hut in the jungle. And
wow.
I'm sitting there and
that's
we're
next
doing
level
this breath work. Yeah, well, it's so funny because I'm sitting there doing this breath work and I get this like thought in my mind. I was like, the 18-year-old me would be like, what a loser.
Right. What are you doing? Don't you see all the stuff we have to get done? And you're sitting here doing nothing. In fact, you're not even thinking. You're trying to stop thinking. Right? So, no, 100%. So I think, I want to say a couple of things. One, I think, MIT grads, this is probably the hardest thing in the world for us because we're, what problem am I solving? Well, that might be a problem. Let me think about that and come up with a solution, right? So we're our brains never shut. We devalue it, right? And then the last thing is, by the way, I just want to go on record here. Don't let anybody on this call think that I'm an expert. I'm still grade school at best level meditator. I think I'm out of kindergarten, which took a while. But, but I'm not a guru who can, I'm going to go meditate for an hour and I'm not even close. You know what I mean? I'm fighting my brain to shut down the ideas that are popping in and out. But again, like I said before, I'm not at the top of the mountain of meditation. I'm on the journey and I'm loving the journey and it is really giving me rewards. And like you, I dismissed it. I just didn't think there were any. I thought this was an empty journey and I am totally wrong. Totally wrong. It's brought a lot. I wonder, Rob, if I had done more breath work, more meditation, like you teach people, while I was climbing and building my life and career. I wonder what effects that would have had rather than now.
I do too, honestly. And we should totally do one at some point. But I think okay, there's a couple things for folks. So one is, when I tried to start meditating, I was suffering from depression. And this is a real statistic. It's like 11% of people, if you try to go inwards, it's catastrophic. And so if you're suffering from mental illness, professional help.
You got to be careful.
Yes.
No question.
Right? Because for me, and this is not uncommon, is like I was going inwards and it was making me feel worse. So if that happens to you, stop meditating and obviously go to therapy, get professional help, right? For people who are in a good place or fine, you're feeling okay. If you start to go inwards, it's going to open things up, right? But you get more clarity, you feel better. Like there's actually a lot of science behind this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And you don't have to think about like, hey, I got to be the guy who's floating on the top of the mountain with no thoughts. Like maybe 3 people in the world can do that.
Right, exactly. Right? But that's sadly the image. Everybody tries it and they go, well, that didn't happen. This is garbage. What am I?
Yeah, right. And so, and most of what meditation is actually like your brain wandering and you going, oh, and then pulling it back. So it's like, it's completely normal for that to happen. And so give yourself the time, the reps, and it's just learning a new skill. It's just like when they dropped you into, 801 and I didn't know what an integral was.
Right.
right? It's like you get kicked in the face for a while and then you figure something out.
Well, I think, look, I'm certainly not at the end of that journey. And Rob, thanks for bringing it up at the end here. But, I would say that so far, what it has really helped me is center myself on what I want out of the rest of my life. We were talking before about how I admire what people do with wealth. Well, meditation and gratefulness, that's what got me to that point where I realized, wait a minute, this stuff that I thought was so important and I coveted and I wanted and I strived for, I realized for me, that's empty. And I only came to that by looking inward, by really saying, all right, let's cut through the layers of ego and, oh, you're the big man and top guy and all that stuff, so let's accept that and put that aside. What's under that? Let's get under it. And that's where it really helped me find out where my real happiness is. And I'm still on the journey, man.
We're always on the journey, Rob. That's the game. It's been an incredible podcast. Everyone out there, I mean, where else can we land than we're on the journey to happiness? It's the way to be. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a fun interview.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so grateful to have met you, Rob, and have this conversation. This was a lot of fun. And I hope it's useful to some of our peers out there.
Oh, I'm 100% it will be. For everyone listening, I dropped Rob's LinkedIn in the podcast notes if you want to reach out to him. Do you want to tell us, can they donate to your shelter? Do you want to give us a plug for that?
So our philanthropy in Concord, New Hampshire is the Thrive Support Center. But if you reach out to me via my LinkedIn, I'm certainly happy to send you links. Just a wonderful cause. And, there are crisis centers and domestic violence shelters everywhere through this country. It's not a fun topic, right? But it is everywhere. And if you just open your eyes and take a look, I bet you'll find a local center that would love your support.
Amazing. Everyone out there, thank you so much for listening, Rob. Incredible interview. And we'll see you all next time here on the Infinite and Beyond Show.